Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Color Challenge. In today's episode, we are going to be taking you through the blue list that revolves around JACE BELEREN, and I guess it's called Aerial Domination. So, whenever you start the game, you have to go through all of these through the color challenge, basically, to get notified about the colors, to have more information about the colors and what they resemble, right? So we started the other day with the white colored list here, and we ran through it. We explained what it does. We explained what resembles the white color, usually life gain and creatures and like angels and stuff like that. Within the blue color today, it usually resembles flyers. It usually resembles the mechanic tempo, or the game playstyle tempo, and the playstyle control, and also the main thing about blue, which is card draw. So, if you're just starting the game just now, you have to understand that the blue color is not the really aggressive color, the color that, puts a lot of creatures on the field, that attacks a lot. The blue color usually resembles card advantage, and what I mean by card advantage is basically card draw. So you draw a lot of cards from the color blue. A lot of cards within the blue color gives you card draw, and a lot of cards within the blue color gives you control cards, which are usually counter spells. Counter spells are spells that you cast when your opponent has cast a spell that's on the stack before it resolves. You cast a counter spell on it to counter it. So basically, it doesn't hit the battlefield. It just fizzles out and goes to the graveyard. You just countered their spell. They no longer have it. It no longer resolves. It no longer gains any value or any effect. Also, there's another playstyle that revolves around the color blue, which is usually tempo. And by tempo, I mean going under your opponent, sneaking your way through, basically switching the effect of the game around in your favor, because within the Magic the Gathering game, it's all about who goes first and who opens better. And what I mean by opens better is who opens with a better hand. So with the blue color, you can tempo, which is you play a tempo game, you basically switch the game around, you basically bounce their stuff back to their hand, or phase their stuff out in a way where like they can't attack, or when they're trying to attack, you bounce their stuff back to their hand, which resembles for example, like this card here. There's a very good example of a card here within I guess Unsummon. I don't know why the cards are why are the cards red like that? This deck has the following issue and cannot be. The deck contains cards not legal in this format. What's going on? Alright, let's go to decks. I think this is where we can view it here. Alright, perfect. So, Unsummon, right? Unsummon is a perfect tempo card, a perfect example of a tempo card here. It says return target creature to its owner's hand. So as you know, whenever you cast a creature, it's the first turn that it enters the battlefield. So it enters with something called a summoning sickness. Summoning sickness means you can't attack with this creature as soon as it enters the battlefield, and you can't activate its effects unless it has haste. Haste is basically the mechanic where if a creature was to enter the battlefield that has haste, you can activate its abilities if there were mana abilities. Also, you can attack with the creature the same turn it entered the battlefield. So any creature within the game Magic the Gathering enters the battlefield with summoning sickness unless they have haste. So the thing about tempo that's nice is that they can't attack with that creature the same turn, right? So if they play that creature, you can bounce it back to their hand, which costs them an entire turn, and then on their next turn, they're going to replay that creature, but they still can't attack with it. They can block though, but they still can't attack, which is putting them behind on 2 turns. So it's a bit of a tempo play, right? You're playing a tempo game, you're either phasing their stuff out, and by phasing, I mean their stuff phases out, and it's called phase out. Basically, it can't be targeted. It's like out of the game basically for an entire turn, right? It can't be targeted, it can't block, it can't attack, it can't do anything. It's out of the game for a turn, and blue has access to that mechanic. Also, when you're tempoing, you put yourself ahead from your opponent. You're basically playing small creatures that can get in for some damage, or big creatures that can get in for some damage. You're either protecting these creatures with counter spells, or you're disrupting your opponent's game plan by bouncing their creatures or phasing them out or or tapping them so that they can't block or attack. There's a lot you can do with this, right? A perfect example for a tapped creature is this card right here. It's an enchantment. It's called Water Knot. For 3 mana, you cast an enchantment, and an enchantment is a permanent. Anything that enters the battlefield and stays on the battlefield is a permanent. A perfect example for a permanent are lands. A perfect example for a permanent are creatures. They're called permanents. Enchantments are permanents as well because they enter the battlefield and they stay. Artifacts are permanents. Planeswalkers are permanents. The only non-permanent cards would be sorceries and instants. So when you look over here, let's say over here, right? Lands are permanents, enchantments are permanents, and sorceries and instants are not permanents. Creatures are permanents, and artifacts are permanents as well. It's shown over here as a prime example, right? Commanders obviously is a completely different format, but all of these are permanents besides instants and sorceries. So that's the point. When an enchantment enters the battlefield, it's a permanent, it sticks, right? So its effect stays, as opposed to an instant or sorcery. Once you cast an instant, for example, in the case of Glint here, an instant is a card type that you can cast at any moment of the game. It's the fastest or the highest speed spell. Instant speed spells can be cast during your opponent's turn or your turn, and during any phase of your opponent's turn and your turn. A perfect example for a card that has Flash, for example. Flash, let's write Flash here. Let's see what we have. Let's go not collected, just so I can show you a perfect example here. Let's go not collected. Let's say this creature right here. A creature with Flash, it says you may cast a spell with Flash anytime you could cast an instant. So anything that has Flash, whether it's a creature, whether it's a sorcery, anything at all that has Flash, usually creatures, you can cast as though they have instants. So now you can cast creatures on your opponent's turn as well if they have Flash, because you can cast them at instant speed. So instants and sorceries, you cast them, you get a one-time value off of them, unless they have some sort of recursion effects where they can recast themselves or anything like that. You get a one-time effect from them and they're gone, right? Like Glint here says target creature you control gains Hexproof. Hexproof is a mechanic that basically is a ward effect, right? Anything that has Hexproof cannot be targeted by spells or abilities. So if you give your creature Hexproof while your opponent is targeting it with a removal spell, now your opponent can't target it anymore because it has Hexproof, so their spell fizzles out. And so, while as an enchantment, going back to our first topic here, an enchantment like this one, for example, that associates within the blue color, it enters the battlefield, it enchants a creature of your choosing, usually an opponent's creature, it taps that creature and it doesn't untap during your opponent's untap step. Of course, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, and upkeep is that when your opponent passes the turn, you get your turn. At the beginning of each upkeep, every player untaps their permanents. They untap their lands, they untap their creatures that are tapped, they untap everything that requires untapping during the upkeep. But this spell right here says your opponent can't untap that creature during your opponent's untap step, right? An untap step is during the upkeep. So this is a very prime example of an enchantment that provides you a bit of tempo as well. You're tapping your opponent's creature, and the tapped creature cannot attack or block because it's tapped. It's usually their recovery step, right? Not recovery mainly. It's usually their basically once they attack, for example, they don't tap when they block, they only tap when they attack. So you can you basically just put them out of the game. Basically, they're still in the game, their effects are still viable, it doesn't affect their abilities, but they just can't attack or block, which is tempo, right? You're basically disrupting your opponent's creature in a way, you're disrupting your opponent's plan. This is what's usually associated with the blue color. Another prime example of a blue color here is card draw, right? Like Winged Wards here. This is a very specific card draw spell. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. So in a deck that has a ton of flyers like this one, this is a very synergistic card that draws 2 cards. So as you can see, a lot of blue cards have draw cards, right? So this is a perfect example of a draw card. Another perfect example for the color blue here are flyers, and there are a ton of flyers. For example, in this list here, this list is called aerial domination for a reason, because you're dominating the air with flyers, and you have a ton of effects here. Very, very important thing, guys, is for you to focus on reading the cards. You have to read the cards, and you have to understand sequencing. I think if you want to become very successful in this game, you have to anticipate what you have to plan ahead, right? You have to plan for what your opponent is going to play, plan for what your opponent is going to follow up, plan for your play, and plan for your follow up as well. So if you have, for example, if you have a creature like this and then a creature like this, and you have 3 mana, so which one do you play first? Well, you read the creatures, and that's how you basically sequence your plays. So let's say this one, for example. This one says creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. And this one says when Cloudkin Seer enters the battlefield, draw a card. So which one do you play first, in your opinion? For me, I would play this first, because this will make this cost 1 less to cast, so that way you can make a lot of plays during your following turn. When you actually say, let's say you have 2 of these and 1 of this, you play this first on turn 3. On turn 4, you play a land, which gives you 4 mana now, and then if you have 2 of these, you can cast both of these despite the fact that they have 3 mana, all thanks to this creature's effect, because this creature puts their cost, lowered their cost in a way where now you can cast 2 of them for 4 mana, you draw 2 cards out of their effects, and that's how you sequence good, right? Anything, there are engine cards and there are cards that benefit off of the engine. This is an engine card for flyers because it makes them cost 1 less to cast, and these are cards that benefit off of the engine card because they enter the battlefield cheaper. For example, you have a card over here. It says whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. Now, we explained summoning sickness. So since you have a creature with summoning sickness, you can't play this creature first and then play creatures after this creature and hope to get value off of this. No, you have to play creatures before you play this creature, and creatures with flying, which we have plenty of with this list. This is why it costs a lot too, because, for a reason, because you play this usually on turn 7 or whenever you have 7 mana, and by then you'd already have a board that has creatures. So you already played a creature, let's say, it's the next turn, it doesn't have summoning sickness, which means you can attack with it now. You play this after you have a creature with flying, not before. You play this after, so that you can attack with the already gone summoning sickness creature and draw a card off of it. So for example, you have this and this in hand, or you have Riddle Master Sphinx here, which costs 6 mana, and Wind Reader Sphinx here, which costs 7 mana. You play this first, obviously, you get it down so that the next turn when you're ready to play this, it loses its summoning sickness, which means now it can attack. Then it loses its summoning sickness on your next turn, and now you play this, and now you can attack with this creature here so that you draw a card off of this. So as you can see, in order for you to get the full value out of your cards, you have to sequence them good. You have to pay in mind like what to play first, and it gets really easier for you to figure that out if you read your cards. It's pretty straightforward. Read the cards. Let's say, okay, you read this card and you say whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. How do you get value off of this card? Very straightforward. You need a creature that has flying that can attack. Well, if you play this first and then you play a creature on top of it, you won't be able to attack because that creature has summoning sickness. You understand? So you won't be able to attack with it. So it's very simple, very, very simple. Even this card benefits off of its own as well because it's a flyer, and whenever this card attacks, it can gain value as well. So it's a very, very prime example. This also is a very prime example of a sorcery speed spell, and sorcery spells are only spells that you can cast during your turn. You can't cast sorcery spells during your opponent's turn. You can only cast sorceries during your main step 1 and main step 2, or main phase 1 or main phase 2 is when you are able to cast your sorceries. Anything besides that, you can't cast sorceries during your opponent's turn. So what I would do, for example, if I have this card and I have, let's say, 3 creatures on the battlefield and I want to attack but their creatures can block my attackers and possibly even kill them. So what I do is cast this card before combat so that it taps all of the creatures that my opponent controls, and now I can attack through, right? Because their creatures are tapped, they can't block. Now I can attack through. And it also has another effect that says those creatures don't untap during that player's untap step, which is very good for us because it tempos, right? It's a lot of tempo. The thing about the blue color is that you don't usually have a lot of removal when it comes to the blue color. Removal, which means like cards that can get rid of other cards. Your only removal per se would be counter spells, but what if you were during a game, you had all your mana tapped, you didn't keep up a counter spell, and you couldn't counter anything and it resolved. You can't remove it because the blue color doesn't usually revolve around removing all that much. It does have removal, but it doesn't provide good removal like all the other colors, like red, like black, like white. White and black usually have the best removal. So with the blue color, you have to be very careful, very patient, and you have to hold up mana if you have a counter spell so you can counter something before it resolves, because once it resolves, it's going to be really hard for you to remove it. You either remove it by blocking with the creature and killing it if it was a creature. If it was an enchantment, for example, you're not going to be able to remove it unless you have a bounce spell that can bounce permanents, and so on and so on, if you understand. That's what I mean. So unfortunately, I previously recorded the entire gameplay for the blue deck here when it comes to the color challenge, but the recording didn't have the audio, so I was just talking and talking, but there's no audio. So it's very unfortunate. I actually managed to beat all of these and win the game and acquire the blue deck, but it's no problem. I tried to explain each and everything that has to do with the color blue necessarily, and that has to do with this deck. This deck is very easy to play. All you need to do is hold up your unsummon. This is my finished version of the list, by the way. They give you 70 cards out of 60, I think, and you play all the games using those cards, but then at the end, this is my finished product. I managed to cut some cards so I can make it a 60 out of 60 card list, and 60 out of 60 is very important so that you can have a healthy ratio between spells and lands. 60 out of 60 is for consistency. It's the ideal way to build a list. Usually your list requires 60 out of 60 cards. If you want to go above 60 cards, you can, but it's going to be a little more complex, because the more you go above 60, let's say you're trying to include more cards here, you have to include more lands, so that the ability for you, or the chances of you top decking lands, increase so that you can actually play those spells that you've included in the list, because without lands, you're not going to be able to play the game because you can't cast those spells, So keep it at 60 out of 60, and it all depends. The land count, of course, depends on your average converted mana cost. So since our average converted mana cost is 3.3, so the average spell that we're going to cast, or the average cost of a spell, is 3.3 averagely. We need 25 lands. If it's anything, for me, I take it as a little like rule. If it's anything under 3 mana average, I usually include 24 lands, but it all depends. Some creatures or some strategies have a low curve, which means you don't have these. For example, a low curve looks kind of like this one. A extremely low curve looks like this one, for example, that only has the highest mana cost of spells you cast are 3 mana spells, and the insanely low curve is basically a deck that only has 1 and 2 drops for me. So what you do with a list like this, you usually want like 22 lands or 21 lands, depending on your strategy. Some strategies have 1 and 2 mana cards only, but they require a lot of mana because of the cards that they have, right? So sometimes you need to go back to 24 lands. But for me, since I'm playing a deck that has this blue deck has a high mana cost, right? It has 3 drops, it has 4 drops, 5 drops, 6 drops, and even 7 drops. What you need to do is you need to increase those lands to be able to cast your high mana spells reliably. So that's the idea behind it. So yeah, I hope I've been helpful today. Basically, I forgot one thing, which is the flying mechanic, right? Flying mechanic here is basically a creature that can go over the top. a creature with flying cannot be blocked with creatures without flying. It can only be blocked with a creature with flying. So it can only be blocked with another creature that has flying or a creature that has reach. Reach is a ground creature, usually a green creature that has reach, that can reach for those creatures that have flying and block them. So you have to be very careful about that. So yeah, that's the idea behind the blue list. The blue list is a ton of fun to play here. You can actually run through these games pretty easily. These are your daily quests, and with gems, you can buy packs from the store. You go to the store here. I was taking a little long. Yeah, you go to the store and you have your daily featured, I guess, deals here. You have gems here that you can buy, and with gems you can invest in the store, or you can buy packs to expand your collection. And it's very important for you to expand your collection, because once you expand your collection, you're going to be able to delve into more decks, more strategies. You're not going to be constricted to only one deck. The more you play, the more daily quests you finish. If you don't want to spend real money, you finish your daily quests, you get wild cards, or you get packs with those gold coins. You open the packs. The more packs you open, the more wild cards you get, and with those wild cards you can craft cards that you want for a new deck or that you want for an existing deck. Let's go not collected here, for example, and show you a prime example of that. So let's say you want to craft this card. This card is a uncommon rarity, and uncommon is that silver emblem right in the middle all the way to the right. Uncommon, you can trade that for one of the uncommon wild cards, and now you have this card. So if you want 4 of these, you want 4 uncommon wild cards, which we currently don't have. It's a brand new account, mainly for the tutorials here. So I hope I've been very informative when it comes to the blue list here. We're going to continue to do our thing. I'm gonna finish the color challenges, and I'm gonna be having in-depth guides when it comes to the black color, the red color, and the green color. And after that, I'm gonna show you how to play the game, how to make decks. I'm gonna have an in-depth guide for all of you new players. This is strictly for new players that are trying to get into the game but having a hard time, or don't understand what is really going on with this game or the mechanics. I'm gonna try my best to cover all of the mechanics, all of the games, all of the cards as well, if I can, and all of the different strategies. We're gonna jump in the different aggro strategy, the mid-range strategy, the tempo strategy, and the control strategy, and the combo strategy, which are the main play styles of this game, right? So we're going to cover that as well. Don't worry, the next video is going to have the black deck here. I'm gonna cover the black deck, and then I'm gonna tell you what resembles with the black color here. Also, we're going to jump into red, green. We're gonna finish the color challenge, then I'm gonna show you how to expand your collection, what you need to do to acquire more cards, and how to build new decks and enjoy playing the game. Actually, for now, you can't play against other players. You have to finish acquiring all these decks, then you go home. After you either make a new deck if you've acquired new cards, or you don't. You can use one of those existing decks that they give you here. And then you go on the play queue, you go in the middle here, you choose, this is ranked play. You can now play with your opponent here, but if you pick standard play, for example, you can't play. You can play alchemy play, I guess, with these decks, which is fine. Alchemy is a different format, yet that uses different cards as well. For now, try out standard, get into standard, broaden your horizons a little bit, and then after that you can jump into different formats like alchemy. And there are different formats like brawl. Brawl is basically you pick a commander, and then you I'll explain brawl later on as well. You have historic and explorer as formats as well, but we'll get into those later on. So for now, just enjoy playing the game, unlock all these lists, and we'll take it from here. So with that being said, I also do private coaching sessions. If you are new and you want me to take you on a one-on-one journey where I teach you everything that I know, I do private coaching sessions. So head up the Discord, join the Discord, and private message me on Discord for your inquiry, and we'll go from there. Also, if you want to support the channel in any way, and if you find value within my content, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, become a patron. If you want to go the extra mile to support the channel, it'll help me out greatly for my time and effort. And with that being said, I'll see you guys later with another tutorial. Okay?